Um,
Do a little clap. Ocean Child, take one.
okay, so you can walk in and
Okay.
then I'll start. Hey, Marco.
Hey.
So, do you want to start just with an introduction of who you are?
Yeah, I'm Ocean Child. I'm the singer and the producer for the band.
Awesome. Yeah, so I just want to start with how Ocean Child came to be. From what I read on your website, it seems like it was kind of like an alter ego in high school almost. Could you talk about more like the motivation behind it?
Yeah, I remember, I think it was the summer of my junior year of high school, I started to mess with Logic, a software to produce music, and basically just started writing music, like songs with words and stuff, which I hadn't done before. I had spent most of my time just messing around with like making random sounds on my computer. But then there came a point I started like being into like songs. I think I listened, there was a couple albums that really like, was like, okay, I want to like write words. There was this album by Bob Dylan, and there was this album by Alex Turner. And I thought to myself, okay, like I can do this. I want to do this. So I started writing and putting out music on like SoundCloud, basically. And I wouldn't like show anybody. It would just be like, maybe someone on the internet will find this. And yeah, eventually, like I think during my senior year, I met a few people who played instruments in my gym class. And we just like, after school, I think we just like, the three of us met up at one of our houses and started jamming. And yeah, and then I met some other people in high school, and from there we just started like a little band. So that's kind of how it started. It's crazy how time flies, you know. All of a sudden it's like high school. Like my friend texted me the other day, and he was like, "You know that we were freshmen like 7, 8 years ago in high school," and I was like, "Oh my God, like, geez, it's a long time, but it doesn't feel that long." You know what I mean? So it's like it's all really clear to me still, as if it was like something really like soon, you know.
Yeah. So songwriting was like a newer thing. Have you been playing music your whole life though, or?
Yeah, I got my first guitar at like 8. I hated it. It was like, well, I just didn't like. I didn't like practicing. I didn't like my teacher. Like my dad made me do it or whatever. My first guitar was like a little like 3/4 size, like I think it was like an Ibanez. It looked like a really metal looking guitar. It was like all black and like really edgy looking thing. And I was like, I don't like this. But I picked it back up in middle school. I picked up, I think I found an acoustic guitar somewhere. And I just started like, when my parents would leave to, I don't know, go to dinner or whatever, I would like be like singing in the house. And as soon as I would hear them come in, I would be like, okay, shut up, like put it all away. You know what I mean? So I just like kind of like got into the acoustic and chords and stuff. And yeah, I never really took to lessons. I don't know. I just thought it was too rigid. It was too like, okay, today we're practicing pages 13 to 15, and it was not for me. I don't know.
Yeah. Did the songwriting stem out of quarantine? Because you said, I think that was when it was happening.
I think that was what was happening. I think lockdown was a weird time for me. I enjoyed it. I mean, it was a privilege to enjoy something like that. But it was something that kind of songwriting and production and being kind of holed up in a space where I felt that freedom to actually write and produce and just do whatever. It kind of like, I always think back to that time. I do. And I think about it a lot. And I think about it as like a good grounds for a sense of freedom I think that I need as a songwriter. I think that sense of release, that sense of freedom, that sense of not being constrained, I think is something that, as for myself, and I think for all songwriters, like we all have to kind of remind ourselves, you know, that root of where this really comes from, you know, that wellspring of feelings and emotions or something, if you want to call it that, where it all comes out. So yeah, grounding myself in certain moments like that is really important, but also being able to look ahead.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about your songwriting process? Because you mentioned like Bob Dylan, like that's
Yeah.
kind of an intense thing to like look up to.
Oh,
So,
it's crazy. No, and I'm no Bob Dylan. I think the songwriting process is always changing for me. I don't stick to one process because the problem with processes is like can really create a sort of framework. And I think as soon as there's a framework, there's a sort of this is how it's done. And I feel like the music that comes out of that usually doesn't have a same charge as something that comes out, something something more fluid, I guess. But I think generally there are some things that I like to do. There are a few places that I like to be in that help me write, that give me inspiration. Something that I was talking about with my friend the other day is about being in transit, being between places, commuting to school. I go to DePaul, so commuting or being on a plane or a road trip or something like that, on a train even. Like these are spaces that are really important to me in terms of like giving me that feeling of losing my ground, because you're not where you were and you're not where you need to be yet. And so this distance between this, this space of sort of unhomeliness, I think is really essential for my passion, for my inspiration. I think that if you ask me about process, I think I can only tell you about places I like to be. I like to be with a pen and paper. I like to be on the guitar. I like to be in between places. And I think from there, that's like, for me, that's the most important thing. Of course, like sometimes I write stuff on my phone, sometimes I write it down on a paper. I think those two different mediums actually lend themselves to different songs. But either case, I think grounding myself in where it comes from I think that's what helps me a lot.
Mm-hmm. We talk more about that with the phone versus pen and paper. That's interesting.
Yeah. I feel like I write a lot on my phone because it's just right there. Mm-hmm. Pen and paper, it's like, okay, I gotta pull out and flip through. A great thing about the phone too is you can like look up shit that you wrote 2 years ago. Because I was like, oh, I remember there's one lyric I had and I don't know where it's from. So, but the Notes app on the iPhone, you can just like look up a key word and then it's like shows you like where it's wonderful. I mean, a pen and paper, I have notebooks from like a year ago that I can never find what I need. So, I mean, objectively, technology, like, being on the phone is so much easier, or being on the laptop is so much easier to index things and to look up things. But with a pen and paper, there's something special about that. I think there is. And that's a bit of hocus pocus, but I have to make myself believe that it is hocus pocus because it is something really special about writing it down. It's sort of this pure connection with the world in a way that I feel like the phone has a disconnection, which doesn't really make sense, but in a way, for me, it does. Because you actually are in tune with you, just you, in that moment. And even you're writing it down and you have everyone has their own handwriting. And sometimes handwriting can say a lot about, where you're at. I look at handwriting from another notebook I kept last year, and I was like, this is terrible handwriting. But sometimes it's super well done. And it's just interesting to like judge my own focus or my own immediacy through handwriting. And I think that like the best thing about music for me is the fact that it's like a connection with yourself in a way that you wouldn't know, an unconscious way that you're unraveling. And I find that really special. I find that connection really sacred even. Again, hocus pocus, but I think it's a good thing,
Yeah, definitely. It seems like how you're describing songwriting, it's like you find like comfort almost within your music. Do you feel like that is something that you've always felt through music throughout your life, or is it specific to what you've been creating yourself?
No, my whole life. I was listening to I asked my dad the other day to bounce me a CD that he had that I used to listen to as a kid. It was by The Cure. It was like this compilation album called, I think, Staring at the Sea or something. And it's got this creepy old man on the cover. And I just remembered that. I'm like, I want to listen to this. And so it was like, it's like a best of compilation. And I was listening to it and I was like, man, I listened to this and I remember being a kid listening to this. And I feel like it kind of made me feel reconnected to a certain sense of like a home that I was at, a place I was at mentally, youth in general. And where I'm at now, it's like that distance is so great, but there's something really special about music because it brings you back to places. And for me, there's no art form that quite is so immediate where it takes you back or it takes you to somewhere. No art form is so immediately attunes you to the mood of things, especially if it's great. So I think I forgot your question, but I just I love that feeling. I think, and so music has always been something that connects me to the world, more importantly than myself. So.
Do you feel that way, like when you're playing a song that you wrote 3 years ago? When you're playing it live, do you feel almost like you're going back in time?
Yeah, in a way where it's like I can do so much better than this now. You know what I mean? Like someone showed me like a few of my demos off SoundCloud, which I think you can find. You can look it up. And I'm like, man, I'm better than this. I'm better than this. This sucks. This is terrible. And I don't know. I thought about it, and I think it's like it means there's growth. It means that there's a future. That there's you can look at where you were 3 years ago and look at yourself now and say, okay, I feel different. I feel different. I wouldn't write the same thing as I did, a couple of years ago.
Yeah, totally. On your website, you describe your music style as a blend of new wave, indie, and alternative rock, which is kind of like a big mixture. How did you find your sound? And like, are your early songs like that as well?
Yeah, I think the act of finding is what's most important, because I don't know who wrote that, but but nonetheless, I think it's right. I think, yeah, it's a blend. I can't really consciously know what I'm blending, but I think that's really important. I think it's important not to know what you're blending, because in a certain extent, as soon as you think, okay, I'm gonna blend indie rock or you said new wave, and like to do that consciously, I think it would come out as something kind of contrived and something not really speaking. At least for me, I always have to feel like it's speaking in some capacity, and so I think I just write, and I think the result is a sort of unconscious blend, because we all are just the summation of all our experiences of our whole life, and we can't run away from that. We can take it up, we can transform it, we can think about it, and I think that's the beauty of being a songwriter, is that you can actually take up your own life, the summation of it all, and kind of realize things about this summation that you wouldn't have known if you didn't do it. So for me, finding the sound is, I think it's finding, it's the act of doing it, it's the journey, something like that.
Yeah,
so.
Totally. So Ocean Child started with just you, and then you said you met your friends and you started doing it as a band.
Yeah.
How do you think that has changed your process, and is it like more of a collaboration? Do you feel like you've taken stuff from them and vice versa?
Definitely, definitely. This last EP we put out called Camouflage was very much more collaborative than anything that had come out before, and I think for that reason it's better than what came out before, and what we have in store is even better, because we're just like locked in as a unit. I think to a certain extent, I do need time to kind of write on my own, to kind of live a little bit and have an experience and have something to write about. But then once we're there, then we can talk about music. We can talk about guitar tones and the place, mixing and production and stuff like this, and musical stuff that I think is only a result of living. So to a certain extent, I think that one of the things that I've said in an interview before is that like I feel really safe around my friends, around my band. And I think that feeling of safety, that feeling of freedom, the feeling that you can be who you are in front of them is required for me. I'm not the most, I'm pretty quiet, I'm pretty shy, I'm pretty closed off. And so when I'm around people that I really care about, I really feel myself opening up to the world in a way that helps me write, in a way where writing is the result of this opening up. And I think that's a special thing that helps me.
Yeah, that's interesting that you're talking about writing as a way of opening up, but then how do you feel when you're doing live shows? If you're more timid?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I find myself, I think something about the live show, I do kind of open up more. I do kind of show a different side of myself, if there is any side to myself. But I think the live show really does allow me to share with something with someone. I think like we need live shows, you know what I mean? People discover music now on TikTok and Instagram, which is awesome. But there's something about going to a show and experiencing music, sound with people around you and the people on stage. You know, we kind of started playing house shows back at U of I, and that was a really interesting experience. We were all on the same floor. You know, it was in a basement, or it was, you know, outside somewhere in a backyard. There's something about this equal level that I think that speaks true to what music really is. It's not that the artist is on this higher platform talking down or playing down to the crowd. It's more that we're all sharing in something. And I feel like when we played house shows, I really felt that. I really felt this feeling that we're all experiencing this in unison. So yeah, that's my experience with shows. I mean, I love it.
Yeah, that's interesting. When you're writing your music, even if you're not thinking about how people are gonna take it, like how people are gonna feel when they listen to, what do you hope that people would feel when they're listening to your music, or even at your shows?
Yeah, it's hard. I guess when I'm writing, I can't have any notion of or hope of what it'll come across as. But I think once it's all been made and mastered and pristine and shiny, ready to come out, I hope that people can feel a bit more about that life is interesting. You know, in a certain sense, like it's not about what they feel about the music. It's that the music drives people to open up. In a certain sense, that's how I've felt when I listen to music or when I write. It's like this opening up. And there are many people who are closed off, who feel at a distance from the world. And so if music can be the conduit to open one up to being part of the world again, and to feel like when you go outside that you feel this connection, then that's the purpose of it, I think. And so I hope that my songs or Ocean Child is somewhat of a contribution to the larger scale amazing phenomenon of music. So yeah.
Okay, so since we were talking about live shows, I am curious, like, what is your favorite show you've played, and has there been like a moment specifically that you've been like, wow?
Yeah, I really liked playing. We played at Follinger Auditorium at U of I. I really liked that one. It was a cool place. It was at U of I. I went to U of I. We played with this band called Sales, which was awesome. They're really nice people. That was a good one. I really liked playing. There used to be well, I don't know. I'm gonna say used to be. I'm sure they're still around. This DIY venue in Evanston called the Garage Collective, and it was like our first show we ever did in front of people. It was like right after lockdown, like the summer of 2021, when like people could start going out again, and I think everyone was just really excited to be at something like that. And it was really fun. I mean, they decorated it really cool, and there's you can find it on YouTube somewhere, I think. Yeah, and it was like our first proper show, and that was fun. Good memories, yeah.
What is the future of Ocean Child looking like? Do you have any music? Or what is the future of Ocean Child
we're working
looking
on
like?
stuff.
Do you have
We're
any new
working on
music
stuff.
or special performances happening?
I don't want to say an album, but we're working on something. I can't really be the one to tell you if it if how big it's going to be in terms of like, but I can tell you right now that I'm in that space of writing a lot and feeling really inspired to discover more about what it's going to be. And so there is something really cool. And there's a lot of stuff that I want to share at the right time.
Yeah.
So
does this writing period feel different than back when you first started? Yeah.
Does
this writing period feel different than back when you first started?
I think
What's
I'm
different about it?
More cerebral about it, for better or for worse. I think that after doing it for a couple years, you start to feel like there is a process, that there is a sort of sound, that there is, and then you start to feel, well, I start to feel like, forget the process, forget my sound, forget everything like that. So cerebrally, I feel like I'm breaking down those elements that are the sound or something. In a way, it's brought me closer to the heart of what I'm doing. And the songs that I've written recently have been probably the ones that I'm most happy with. The ones that are distant from a sound or a signature. It's only when the signature or the sound is at a distance that I really feel like I'm doing something that enriches my heart in a way, you know, and I hope that it conveys that to the people who listen to it. It's darker, it's moodier, it's not as fast or witty, it's pensive. And I think I don't really know what to make of it. And I think that's exciting, so.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's really cool how you're talking about songwriting because since you started writing, I think it's really cool how you're talking about songwriting because since you started writing lyrics so much later than you did with like playing music, but you seem like really connected to songwriting and like creating those lyrics. When do you think that switch happened? Or is it still kind of
I've always
not
loved
equal
lyrics. I've always loved words. I like reading a lot. So I just like that I just like whenever I write something that really feels like, okay, this is good, this is new for me, then I'm over the moon. I love it. But in terms of like music, guitar and production and stuff like that, that's a whole other side of it that I love too. I've mixed every Ocean Child song. I've produced and mixed everything. And it means that there's the songwriter and there's also the kind of producer. And wearing multiple hats at once can be time consuming, can be a lot. But in a way, I love both worlds. Not that they're separate worlds in a way, but in a sense, the fact that they all come together, I can mix and produce something and make things sound good when I'm not really in a songwriting mood, you know? So then I always feel like I'm doing something in music. In a way it's fulfilling. It really is. Yeah.
What's your favorite song you ever wrote?
Oh God. The one that hasn't come out yet.
What's your favorite song you ever wrote?
Yeah, there's a couple that they're my favorite songs. But in terms of what's already been out, I think either Bent on Steps or Sun are the two that I really like. The ones that I'm proud of, that I come back to a lot, and I think, okay, this still is good. You know what I mean? Like I still like it.
Yeah. And then my last question is, what are you looking forward to right now? And then my last question
I'm looking forward to
is,
reading the next
what are you
chapter of a
looking forward
book
to right
called
now?
East of Eden by John Steinbeck. It's really good so far. So I'm excited to read that next chapter. Yeah.